The morning fog hadn't lifted yet from Peterson Air Force Base when Lieutenant Sarah Chen walked across the flight line toward the massive C-17 Globemaster III that would serve as her final evaluation aircraft. Her flight suit was regulation perfect, her gear bag properly secured, but her steps carried the measured confidence of someone who'd learned to let actions speak louder than appearances. At 5'4", with a slight build that made her look even younger than her 26 years, Sarah had spent the last 18 months proving that size meant nothing when it came to handling 170 tons of military aircraft. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The Advanced Airlift Training Program at Peterson was known for breaking pilots who thought they understood what flying really meant. The C-17 wasn't just an aircraft. It was a flying logistics operation that required pilots to think like engineers, tacticians, and emergency responders all at the same time. The program had a 60% washout rate, and every student who walked onto that flight line carried the weight of knowing that most of their classmates wouldn't make it to graduation. Sarah had arrived at Peterson 18 months earlier with a reputation that preceded her in all the wrong ways. Fresh from basic flight training with scores that placed her in the middle of her class, decent but unremarkable, the kind of pilot who did everything correctly but never stood out for exceptional performance. Her previous instructors had described her as technically competent, but lacking the aggressive edge that made great military aviators. She flew by the book, followed procedures exactly, and never took the kind of calculated risks that separated good pilots from legendary ones. What her instructors hadn't understood was that Sarah Chen flew like someone who'd learned that following procedures exactly was the difference between coming home alive and becoming a statistic in an accident report. Her methodical approach wasn't born from lack of confidence or natural caution. It came from understanding that aircraft were complex machines operated in dangerous environments, and that the difference between success and disaster often came down to whether someone had taken the time to do things exactly right. Flight school at Peterson Air Force Base operated on a culture that prized both technical excellence and what instructors called command presence. The ability to make quick decisions under pressure, to project confidence in situations where hesitation could cost lives, and to demonstrate the kind of natural leadership that made other aircrew members trust your judgment when everything went wrong. For most of the male pilots in Sarah's class, command presence came naturally through years of competitive sports, military academy training, or simply the social conditioning that taught them to speak first and loudest in any group setting. Sarah had learned command presence differently. Growing up as the daughter of a commercial airline pilot who'd immigrated from Taiwan, she'd spent her childhood in airport waiting areas, listening to her father explain the subtle differences between pilots who understood their aircraft and pilots who simply knew how to operate them. Her father had taught her that real confidence came from knowledge so deep it became instinct, from preparation so thorough that surprises became manageable challenges rather than crisis situations. Captain Jake Morrison represented everything that flight school traditionally rewarded. 6'2", with the broad shoulders and easy smile of someone who'd never doubted his place in any room he entered, Morrison had arrived at Peterson with a distinguished record from the Air Force Academy, recommendations from instructors who called him a natural-born aviator, and the kind of effortless charisma that made other students gravitate toward him during briefings and social gatherings. Morrison's flying style matched his personality, aggressive and confident, pushing aircraft to their performance limits and making split-second decisions that often worked out exactly as he'd planned. His landings were firm and decisive, his radio communications crisp and authoritative, and his presence in the cockpit commanded attention from everyone around him. Instructors praised his natural feel for aviation and his ability to adapt quickly to unexpected situations. Lieutenant Marcus Webb had earned his place in the program through sheer determination and political connections that he never openly discussed but everyone understood were significant. His father was a retired Air Force general who'd commanded airlift operations during 3 major conflicts, and Marcus carried the pressure of living up to a family legacy that included 2 Medal of Honor recipients and a tradition of military service dating back to World War I. Webb's flying was competent but uninspired, the kind of performance that met minimum standards without exceeding them. He compensated for his technical limitations with aggressive study habits and a willingness to challenge other students when he felt they weren't meeting the standards that his family name demanded. His critiques were often harsh and personal, delivered with the authority of someone who'd grown up believing that military excellence was his birthright. Second Lieutenant David Park had arrived at Peterson from MIT with an engineering degree and test scores that placed him in the top 5% of all Air Force pilot candidates. His understanding of aircraft systems was encyclopedic, his mathematical calculations precise to the decimal point, and his approach to flying methodical in ways that impressed instructors who valued technical competence over natural instinct. Park's weakness was his tendency to overthink situations that required immediate action, to calculate probabilities when other pilots trusted their training and made rapid decisions. His flying was safe and precise, but it lacked the improvisational skills that separated adequate pilots from exceptional ones. He'd learned to compensate by studying emergency procedures until he could recite them perfectly, hoping that preparation would overcome his natural tendency toward hesitation. The four pilots had been grouped together for advanced formation flying exercises, cross-country navigation training, and the kind of complex cargo operations that would define their careers if they successfully completed the program. Their instructor was Major Patricia Williams, a veteran C-17 pilot with over 3,000 hours of combat airlift experience who'd earned her reputation by successfully completing missions that other pilots considered impossible. Williams had flown humanitarian relief operations into airports that were barely functional, delivered critical supplies to forward operating bases under enemy fire, and evacuated wounded personnel from airfields that were being actively shelled. Her students knew her as someone who demanded perfection not because she enjoyed being difficult, but because she'd seen what happened when pilots made small mistakes in dangerous situations. During their first group briefing, Williams had made her expectations clear, in language that left no room for interpretation. The C-17 was not a fighter aircraft that rewarded individual heroics or aggressive flying techniques. It was a strategic asset that required pilots to think systematically, to coordinate with crew members who depended on their judgment, and to make decisions based on mission requirements rather than personal preferences for excitement or recognition. The aircraft itself was a marvel of engineering that demanded respect from anyone who hoped to operate it successfully. With a maximum takeoff weight of 585,000 pounds, a cargo capacity that could accommodate everything from helicopters to main battle tanks, and the ability to operate from short, unpaved airstrips that would challenge smaller aircraft, the C-17 represented the cutting edge of military airlift capability. Learning to fly the Globemaster required students to master systems that were more complex than anything they'd encountered in basic training. The aircraft's fly-by-wire controls, advanced avionics, and integrated cargo handling systems demanded pilots who could think like systems engineers, while maintaining the situational awareness necessary to operate safely in contested airspace. Sarah approached the training with the same methodical precision that had characterized her previous flying, studying technical manuals until she could visualize every system component, practicing emergency procedures until her responses became automatic, and spending extra hours in the simulator working through scenarios that challenged her understanding of aircraft limitations. Her approach initially earned skeptical comments from her classmates, who viewed her extensive preparation as evidence of insecurity rather than professionalism. Morrison made jokes about pilots who needed to study so hard to understand what came naturally to real aviators. Webb questioned whether someone who required so much preparation would be able to adapt when real-world situations demanded immediate improvisation. The first sign that Sarah's approach might be more effective than her classmates realized came during their initial cargo loading exercise. The training scenario required students to calculate weight distribution for a mixed load that included vehicles, personnel, and time-sensitive medical supplies, then determine the optimal configuration for an aircraft that would be flying through weather conditions that could affect performance significantly. Morrison approached the problem with the confidence that had carried him through previous training, making quick decisions based on general principles and trusting his instincts to guide him toward the right solution. His calculations were close enough to be acceptable, and his loading plan would have worked under normal conditions. Webb relied on standard procedures from the technical manual, following established protocols without considering how environmental factors might require modifications to the basic configuration. His plan met regulatory requirements and would have satisfied most instructors during routine training exercises. Park spent considerable time analyzing the mathematical relationships between aircraft weight, center of gravity, and performance parameters, producing calculations that were precise and well documented. His loading plan was technically correct and demonstrated a thorough understanding of the engineering principles involved. Sarah had spent the previous evening studying weather reports for their planned route, reviewing aircraft performance data for similar loading configurations, and consulting with maintenance personnel about recent aircraft modifications that might affect weight distribution calculations. Her loading plan accounted for factors that the others had overlooked, including fuel consumption changes due to expected headwinds, center of gravity shifts that would occur as cargo was delivered at multiple stops, and backup configurations that could be implemented if weather forced route changes. When Major Williams reviewed their submissions, she spent several minutes examining Sarah's work with the kind of attention that made other students uncomfortable. Williams asked detailed questions about Sarah's assumptions, challenged her calculations, and tested her understanding of the principles behind her decisions. Sarah answered each question with quiet confidence, explaining her reasoning without defensiveness and acknowledging the limitations of her analysis while defending the core logic behind her approach. Her responses demonstrated not just technical competence, but the kind of systematic thinking that Williams recognized from her most successful combat missions. The validation came when Williams announced that Sarah's plan would be used for their actual training flight, with minor modifications based on last-minute weather updates. Morrison's expression showed surprise and irritation, Webb looked skeptical, and Park seemed genuinely impressed by the thoroughness of her preparation. During the pre-flight briefing, Williams used Sarah's work as an example of the kind of preparation that would be expected from pilots who hoped to handle complex missions successfully. She emphasized that good enough wasn't actually good enough when dealing with aircraft systems and cargo operations that left no margin for error. The training flight itself went smoothly, with Sarah's loading configuration performing exactly as she'd predicted. The aircraft handled well within expected parameters, fuel consumption matched her calculations, and the cargo remained secure throughout a route that included several weather-related course corrections. After landing, Williams pulled Sarah aside for a conversation that would have been encouraging if it hadn't been delivered with the kind of intensity that made compliments feel like warnings about increased expectations. Williams told Sarah that her preparation demonstrated the kind of professionalism that separated competent pilots from exceptional ones, but warned that technical competence alone wouldn't be sufficient for the challenges ahead. The real test would come when Sarah had to apply her systematic approach under pressure, when there wasn't time for extensive preparation, when she had to make decisions based on incomplete information while other people depended on her judgment. Williams had seen too many technically proficient pilots fail when confronted with situations that couldn't be resolved through careful planning and methodical execution. Sarah understood that the compliment contained a challenge. She'd proven that she could excel when given time to prepare thoroughly, but flight school was designed to test pilots under conditions that eliminated the luxury of extensive planning. The scenarios ahead would require her to demonstrate that her systematic approach could be applied rapidly, that her methodical thinking could produce good decisions even when time was limited and information was incomplete. Over the following weeks, the training intensified in ways that tested every aspect of pilot development. Night flying exercises that required navigation using instruments alone, formation flying that demanded precise coordination with other aircraft operating in close proximity, and emergency procedures that simulated everything from engine failures to cargo fires that required immediate response. Morrison continued to excel in scenarios that rewarded quick decision-making and aggressive flying techniques. His natural confidence translated into smooth performance under pressure, and his ability to adapt quickly to changing conditions impressed instructors who valued improvisation over preparation. During formation flying exercises, other pilots gravitated toward following his lead, trusting his instincts to guide the group through complex maneuvers. Webb struggled with scenarios that required rapid adaptation, but his determination and family connections kept him in the program despite performance that would have eliminated other students. His study habits were impressive, and his understanding of regulations was comprehensive, but his flying lacked the fluidity that instructors expected from pilots who hoped to handle complex missions. Park's analytical approach served him well during technical exercises that allowed time for calculation and systematic problem-solving. His understanding of aircraft systems was superior to most of his classmates, and his emergency procedures were executed with precision that impressed maintenance personnel who worked with students during training scenarios. Sarah's performance remained consistent across all types of exercises, methodical and professional, regardless of whether scenarios favored technical analysis or rapid decision-making. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Her night flying was smooth and precise. Her formation work demonstrated careful attention to spacing and coordination, and her emergency responses were executed exactly according to procedures, while maintaining the flexibility to adapt when situations developed beyond standard parameters. What distinguished Sarah's flying wasn't dramatic improvement or sudden breakthroughs, but rather the steady competence that suggested deep understanding rather than surface-level skill acquisition. Her radio communications were clear and professional, her aircraft handling was smooth without being flashy, and her decision-making process was visible to instructors who knew how to recognize systematic thinking under pressure. The turning point came during a training exercise that combined multiple challenging elements into a single mission profile that tested everything students had learned up to that point. The scenario required night formation flying to a remote airfield, cargo delivery under simulated enemy fire, and return navigation through weather conditions that limited visibility and required constant course corrections. Morrison approached the mission with his characteristic confidence, making bold decisions that kept the formation moving quickly toward their objective. His aggressive flying style was effective during the initial phases, and his leadership kept other pilots focused on maintaining formation discipline despite challenging conditions. Problems developed during the cargo delivery phase, when simulated ground fire required the formation to adapt their approach pattern while maintaining coordination with ground personnel who were directing the unloading process. Morrison's quick decisions helped the formation avoid simulated threats, but his improvisations created confusion among ground crews who were expecting standard procedures. Webb struggled with the navigation requirements that combined instrument flying with formation coordination, falling behind the group during course corrections, and requiring assistance from other pilots to maintain proper positioning. His determination kept him from giving up, but his performance highlighted the limitations of relying on memorized procedures when situations required flexible adaptation. Park's systematic approach worked well during the planning phase and early execution, but he became overwhelmed when multiple systems required simultaneous attention during the cargo delivery. His calculations were correct, but his execution became hesitant when rapid decision-making was required to maintain formation integrity. Sarah maintained steady performance throughout the mission, adapting her systematic approach to the rapid pace while maintaining coordination with other aircraft and ground personnel. Her navigation was precise. Despite weather challenges, her formation flying remained smooth during tactical maneuvers, and her cargo delivery was executed efficiently without creating confusion for ground crews. The debrief after the mission provided insights into how different approaches to pilot training translated into performance under pressure. Williams used each student's performance as examples of strengths and weaknesses that would become critical during actual operational missions. Morrison's confidence and quick decision-making were valuable assets, but his tendency to improvise without considering how his decisions affected other people created coordination problems that could be dangerous during real operations. His natural flying ability was impressive, but leadership required thinking beyond individual performance to consider how decisions affected entire missions. Webb's determination and regulatory knowledge were important foundations, but his inflexibility when situations required adaptation beyond standard procedures would limit his effectiveness in operational environments where enemy actions and weather conditions demanded constant improvisation. Park's technical competence and analytical skills were valuable for mission planning and systems management, but his hesitation during rapid decision-making scenarios would need improvement before he could be trusted with missions where delays could cost lives. Sarah's systematic approach and steady performance under pressure demonstrated the kind of reliability that mission commanders valued, but Williams warned that consistent competence wouldn't be sufficient for the most challenging scenarios ahead. The final evaluations would test whether Sarah's methodical thinking could produce exceptional results when routine competence wasn't enough. The competition among students intensified as the program approached its final evaluation phase. Rankings were posted weekly, and everyone understood that only the top performers would receive assignments to premier airlift units where their careers could advance rapidly. Average performance meant assignment to routine cargo missions that offered little opportunity for distinction or rapid promotion. Morrison maintained his position at the top of most performance categories, earning praise from instructors who recognized natural leadership ability and confident decision-making under pressure. His flying was smooth and authoritative, and his presence during briefings commanded attention from classmates who respected his obvious competence. The tension between Morrison and Sarah had been building throughout the program, fed by his increasing awareness that her methodical approach was producing results that challenged his assumption that aggressive confidence was the most effective path to success. During group exercises, he'd begun making comments about pilots who needed excessive preparation time, suggesting that real aviators trusted their training and natural instincts rather than overanalyzing every decision. Sarah's response to Morrison's challenges was characteristically professional, neither defensive nor confrontational, but her consistent performance was becoming impossible to ignore. Her aircraft handling was becoming smoother, her decision-making more rapid, and her coordination with crew members more effective as her systematic approach adapted to the increased pace of advanced training. The stage was being set for a final evaluation that would test everything they'd learned, under conditions that would determine not just who graduated from the program, but who would be trusted with the most challenging missions that airlift operations could offer. What none of them knew was that their final test would come not from instructors or simulation scenarios, but from a real-world emergency that would test their training under conditions that no classroom exercise could replicate. The announcement came during Thursday morning briefing, delivered by Colonel Patricia Hayes, with the kind of matter-of-fact tone that made significant news sound routine. Hurricane Elena had strengthened to Category 4 status overnight, with sustained winds of 140 miles per hour, and was tracking directly toward the eastern seaboard, where it threatened to make landfall within 72 hours. Emergency evacuation operations were already underway at multiple military installations in the storm's projected path, including Naval Air Station Oceana in Virginia Beach, where millions of dollars worth of aircraft and critical personnel needed to be relocated before Elena's arrival. The mission would require coordination between multiple airlift units, precise timing to avoid the worst weather conditions, and the kind of professional execution that separated routine cargo operations from life-saving emergency response. 3 C-17 aircraft from Peterson would participate in the evacuation effort, with crews selected based on their demonstrated performance throughout the training program. The missions would serve as practical final evaluations, with students performing under real-world conditions that would test everything they'd learned during 18 months of intensive preparation. Captain Morrison received the first aircraft assignment, along with experienced crew members who could provide guidance during what would be his first operational mission outside of training environments. His selection surprised no one, given his consistent performance rankings and the confidence that instructors had expressed in his natural leadership abilities. Lieutenant Webb earned the second assignment, despite performance that had been inconsistent throughout the program. His family connections hadn't been mentioned explicitly, but everyone understood that his father's influence had played a role in ensuring that he received an opportunity to demonstrate his capabilities under operational conditions. Sarah's name wasn't called during the initial assignments, and she felt the familiar sting of being overlooked, despite performance that had consistently met or exceeded program standards. Her systematic approach and methodical preparation had earned instructor approval, but apparently hadn't translated into the kind of recognition that led to premier assignment opportunities. Lieutenant Park received the third assignment, his technical competence and analytical skills making him a logical choice for missions that would require precise coordination and systematic execution. His selection was based purely on merit, and his relief was visible to classmates who understood how much the assignment meant for his future career prospects. The remaining students would serve as backup crews, available for additional missions if weather conditions or mechanical problems created needs for extra aircraft. Sarah found herself assigned to standby status, which felt like a polite way of being excluded from the real action while maintaining the appearance of equal opportunity. Major Williams delivered detailed briefings about weather conditions, evacuation priorities, and the specific challenges that Hurricane Elena presented for airlift operations. The storm's rapid intensification had caught forecasters off guard, and its projected path threatened multiple installations simultaneously, creating coordination challenges that would test experienced crews under ideal conditions. The evacuation missions would require flights into deteriorating weather conditions, with narrow time windows between acceptable flying weather and conditions that would ground all aircraft regardless of mission importance. Crews would need to balance speed with safety, moving critical assets quickly while avoiding risks that could result in aircraft losses or crew casualties. Sarah studied the weather data with characteristic thoroughness, analyzing wind patterns, pressure systems, and forecast models that predicted Elena's movement over the next several days. Her analysis revealed details that others had missed, including secondary wind patterns that could affect aircraft performance and pressure gradients that might create turbulence in areas where forecast models predicted relatively smooth conditions. During crew briefings, she shared her observations with the assigned pilots, offering insights that could help them avoid problem areas and optimize their flight paths for safety and efficiency. Her contributions were received with professional courtesy, but she could sense the underlying assumption that backup crew members were providing analysis rather than operational expertise. Morrison's preparation for his mission reflected his characteristic confidence, focusing on the broad strategic elements while trusting his natural flying ability to handle tactical details as they developed. His crew briefing emphasized speed and efficiency, with contingency plans that relied on his ability to adapt quickly when conditions changed unexpectedly. Webb approached his mission with the kind of determined preparation that had characterized his entire training experience, studying regulations and standard procedures while hoping that thorough knowledge of official protocols would compensate for his limited experience with emergency operations. His briefing was comprehensive but rigid, following established formats without considering how unique conditions might require modified approaches. Park's mission planning reflected his analytical nature, with detailed calculations and systematic evaluation of multiple scenarios that could develop during the evacuation process. His preparation was thorough and well documented, though some crew members worried that his tendency toward over-analysis might create delays when rapid decision-making was required. The first day of evacuation operations proceeded smoothly, with all 3 aircraft completing their assigned missions without significant problems. Weather conditions remained within acceptable parameters, and the systematic evacuation of personnel and equipment from threatened installations proceeded according to schedule. Morrison's flight demonstrated the kind of confident execution that had earned him recognition throughout the training program. His crew worked efficiently, his decision-making was rapid and effective, and his communication with air traffic control was professional and clear. The mission was completed ahead of schedule, earning praise from mission commanders who appreciated both speed and precision. Webb's performance was adequate but unremarkable, following standard procedures exactly while avoiding the kind of innovative thinking that might have improved efficiency or safety margins. His crew completed their assigned tasks without problems, but several minor delays suggested that his inflexibility when conditions varied from expectations could become problematic during more challenging scenarios. Park's mission showcased his technical competence and systematic approach, with precise navigation and careful coordination that impressed experienced crew members. His analytical preparation had anticipated several problems that developed during the flight, and his solutions were implemented smoothly without creating delays or safety concerns. Sarah spent the day monitoring communications, tracking weather developments, and updating analysis that backup crews might need if additional missions were required. Her work was professional and thorough, but she remained frustrated by her exclusion from operational flying while her classmates gained experience that would influence their career trajectories for years to come. Hurricane Elena continued strengthening overnight, reaching Category 5 status with sustained winds exceeding 160 miles per hour. Forecast models showed the storm maintaining its intensity while accelerating toward the coast, creating a compressed timeline that would require evacuation operations to be completed within the next 36 hours. The second day of missions involved flights into increasingly challenging weather conditions, with turbulence, low visibility, and wind shear that tested pilot skills and aircraft capabilities. The margins for error were shrinking as Elena approached, and mission commanders began implementing stricter safety protocols that prioritized crew protection over mission completion speed. Morrison's second mission revealed limitations in his natural confidence approach when conditions exceeded the parameters of his previous experience. Severe turbulence during approach phase required precise aircraft control and systematic response to multiple warning systems, challenges that his improvisational style wasn't well suited to handle effectively. His crew worked to compensate for his inexperience with extreme weather flying, providing guidance and taking over certain functions when his decision-making became erratic under pressure. The mission was completed successfully, but post-flight debriefs revealed coordination problems and safety concerns that hadn't been apparent during his previous, less challenging flights. Webb's rigid adherence to standard procedures became actively dangerous when weather conditions required modifications to normal approach patterns. His inability to adapt quickly to changing circumstances created problems for air traffic control and forced other aircraft to adjust their operations to accommodate his inflexibility. His crew's frustration was evident during radio communications, and experienced instructors monitoring the mission began expressing concerns about his readiness for operational assignments that would require greater adaptability than training environments had tested. Park's analytical approach served him well during the challenging conditions, with systematic responses to weather-related problems and careful coordination with crew members who appreciated his methodical decision-making process. The morning briefing was tense, with weather officers delivering updates that painted an increasingly grim picture of flying conditions throughout the evacuation corridor. Winds were already gusting above 50 miles per hour at several airfields, visibility was dropping due to increasing precipitation, and turbulence reports from commercial aircraft indicated that conditions were approaching the limits of what even experienced crews could handle safely. Morrison's crew was assigned to one final high-priority mission, evacuating a team of intelligence analysts and critical computer equipment from a facility that couldn't be relocated through ground transportation. The mission would require flying into deteriorating conditions and landing at an airfield where crosswinds were already approaching aircraft limitations. Webb was grounded after his previous flight's performance review revealed safety concerns that mission commanders weren't willing to ignore during such challenging conditions. His inflexibility and poor coordination under pressure had eliminated him from consideration for the most critical missions, effectively ending his participation in the evacuation operations. Park received an assignment to evacuate medical personnel and patients from a military hospital, a mission that required precise coordination and gentle handling to avoid injuring patients who were being transported under emergency conditions. His systematic approach and technical competence made him the logical choice for such a delicate operation. Sarah remained on standby status, watching from the operations center as her classmates prepared for missions that would define their careers and possibly their survival. Her weather analysis had become essential for mission planning, but she wasn't being trusted with actual flight operations, despite demonstrating competence that exceeded several of the assigned pilots. The injustice of her situation was compounded by her growing awareness that the assigned crews were facing conditions that exceeded their experience levels. Morrison's confidence was admirable, but his lack of systematic preparation for extreme weather flying was evident in his crew briefings. Park's technical skills were valuable, but his hesitation under pressure could become dangerous when split-second decisions were required. As the morning progressed, weather conditions continued deteriorating faster than forecast models had predicted. Elena was not only maintaining her intensity, but also accelerating toward the coast, compressing the timeline for safe evacuation operations by several hours. The first sign of serious problems came when Morrison's aircraft encountered severe wind shear during takeoff, nearly causing a crash that was avoided only through quick action by his co-pilot and flight engineer. The incident was reported to Mission Control, but Morrison insisted that conditions were manageable and that his mission could continue as planned. His radio communications revealed increasing stress and uncertainty as his crew dealt with turbulence that exceeded anything they'd experienced during training. His natural confidence was being tested by weather conditions that demanded systematic responses to multiple simultaneous challenges, and his improvisational approach was proving inadequate for the level of precision required. Park's mission was proceeding more smoothly, with his careful preparation and systematic approach helping his crew maintain control despite challenging conditions. However, his aircraft's medical equipment was being stressed by continuous turbulence, and his patients were suffering from the rough ride that even his skilled flying couldn't completely eliminate. Sarah monitored both missions from the operations center, tracking their progress against weather developments that were occurring faster than anyone had anticipated. Her analysis indicated that both aircraft would encounter increasingly severe conditions during their return flights, with wind patterns that could create dangerous situations for crews who weren't prepared for the specific challenges that Elena was generating. The crisis began when Morrison's aircraft developed mechanical problems during the cargo loading phase at their destination airfield. A hydraulic system malfunction, possibly caused by stress from extreme turbulence during the approach, left his aircraft with reduced control authority and limited landing capability. Under normal conditions, the mechanical problem would have been manageable through established emergency procedures and careful coordination with maintenance personnel. However, Hurricane Elena was eliminating normal options for repair or alternative transportation, and the window for safe flight operations was closing rapidly. Morrison's crew faced a decision between attempting an immediate departure with degraded aircraft systems or remaining at an airfield that would be directly impacted by Elena within hours. Neither option offered acceptable safety margins, and the intelligence personnel they'd evacuated were too valuable to risk losing to hurricane damage. Park's medical evacuation was facing similar time pressures, with patients who couldn't survive extended exposure to hurricane conditions, but who also couldn't tolerate the kind of rough handling that flying in extreme weather would require. His systematic decision-making process was being overwhelmed by competing priorities that had no clear resolution. Mission commanders found themselves managing a crisis that exceeded their contingency planning, with 2 aircraft facing impossible choices and weather conditions that were eliminating safe options faster than new plans could be developed. The situation required decisions that balanced human lives against equipment losses, with no guarantee that either choice would produce acceptable outcomes. Sarah's weather analysis had become critical for understanding exactly how much time remained for safe flight operations, but her exclusion from operational flying meant that her expertise wasn't being applied where it was most needed. She could provide accurate forecasts and detailed analysis, but she couldn't fly the missions that would determine whether her classmates and their crews survived the day. The tension in the operations center was palpable, as communications with both aircraft revealed the deteriorating situation that crews were facing in the field. Standard procedures and training scenarios hadn't prepared anyone for the combination of mechanical problems, extreme weather, and time pressures that Elena was creating. Major Williams approached Sarah during a brief lull in radio communications, her expression showing the strain of managing operations that were approaching the limits of what military airlift could accomplish safely. Williams had been observing Sarah's analysis and recommendations throughout the evacuation operations, and she'd begun to recognize expertise that exceeded what she expected from student pilots. Williams asked Sarah for her assessment of whether the stranded aircraft could safely depart before Elena's arrival made flight operations impossible. The question was phrased professionally, but Sarah understood that she was being asked to make recommendations that could determine whether her classmates lived or died during the next few hours. Sarah's analysis was comprehensive and sobering, indicating that conventional approaches to the problem offered no acceptable solutions. Morrison's aircraft couldn't safely fly with degraded hydraulic systems in the severe turbulence that Elena was generating, but remaining at their current location would expose crew and passengers to life-threatening hurricane conditions. Park's medical patients couldn't survive the rough handling that extreme weather flying would require, but they also couldn't survive extended exposure to hurricane conditions at an inadequately sheltered medical facility. Both situations required solutions that went beyond standard procedures and normal safety margins. Williams listened to Sarah's analysis with the attention that she reserved for critical operational decisions, asking detailed questions about weather timing, aircraft capabilities, and alternative options that might create acceptable risk levels. Her questions revealed that she was considering possibilities that went beyond the assignments that had been made that morning. The conversation was interrupted by an emergency communication from Morrison's aircraft, reporting that their mechanical problems had worsened and that their aircraft was no longer capable of safe flight operations under any weather conditions. They were effectively stranded at an airfield that would be devastated by Elena within hours, with no apparent options for evacuation before the hurricane's arrival. The crisis had escalated beyond anything that routine military operations were equipped to handle, requiring decisions and capabilities that exceeded normal parameters for airlift missions. Sarah realized that her analysis was about to become more than academic exercise, that her weather expertise and systematic approach might be the only factors that could prevent a disaster that would cost the lives of people she'd trained with for the past 18 months. Williams turned back to Sarah with an expression that revealed the weight of command decisions under impossible circumstances. The question she asked wasn't about weather analysis or theoretical solutions, but about Sarah's willingness to put her systematic approach and methodical preparation to the ultimate test, under conditions that would determine whether her quiet competence could translate into the kind of exceptional performance that saved lives when everything else had failed. The moment Sarah had been preparing for throughout 18 months of systematic study and careful observation was arriving in a form that no training scenario could have replicated. Her response would determine not just her own future, but the survival of crews who were facing conditions that exceeded every parameter of safe flight operations. Sarah's answer came without hesitation, delivered with the same quiet confidence that had characterized her approach to every challenge throughout the training program. She would fly the rescue mission, using her detailed weather analysis and systematic preparation to navigate conditions that had grounded more experienced pilots and threatened the lives of stranded personnel. Major Williams nodded once, her expression revealing both relief and apprehension about the decision they were making together. Williams understood that Sarah's methodical approach and thorough preparation made her the most qualified pilot available for the mission. But she also knew that sending a student pilot into hurricane conditions represented a level of risk that exceeded normal operational parameters. The briefing room cleared quickly as Williams assembled the crew that would accompany Sarah on what everyone understood would be either a remarkable rescue operation or a catastrophic failure that would cost multiple lives. The crew selection process revealed the respect that Sarah's systematic competence had earned from experienced personnel who would be trusting their lives to her judgment. Master Sergeant Rodriguez, the most experienced loadmaster on the base, volunteered immediately when he learned that Sarah would be piloting the mission. Rodriguez had worked with student pilots throughout his 20-year career, and he'd observed Sarah's methodical approach to cargo operations with professional appreciation that transcended normal instructor-student relationships. Technical Sergeant Kim, a flight engineer with over 15 years of C-17 experience, requested assignment to Sarah's crew after reviewing her detailed system knowledge and systematic approach to emergency procedures. Kim had seen too many confident pilots make dangerous mistakes because they trusted instinct over technical knowledge, and Sarah's respect for aircraft systems impressed him more than flashy flying techniques. Captain Lisa Monroe, an experienced co-pilot who'd flown combat missions in Afghanistan and Iraq, agreed to serve as Sarah's co-pilot after consulting with Williams about the mission parameters. Monroe understood that the flight would require coordination and systematic decision-making under extreme pressure, qualities that Sarah had demonstrated consistently throughout the training program. The crew assembly process took less than 30 minutes, with experienced personnel volunteering to fly with Sarah based on their professional assessment of her capabilities rather than her rank or position in the training program hierarchy. Their confidence provided validation that Sarah's systematic approach had earned respect from people whose lives depended on accurate evaluation of pilot competence. Sarah's mission planning began immediately, with detailed analysis of weather conditions, aircraft performance parameters, and route options that could provide the safest possible approach to the rescue operation. Her preparation was characteristically thorough, considering factors that others might overlook, while developing contingency plans for situations that could develop during the flight. The weather data painted a sobering picture of conditions that were deteriorating faster than forecast models had predicted. Elena's eye wall was now clearly defined on radar, with wind speeds exceeding 180 miles per hour and pressure readings that indicated continued strengthening as the storm approached the coast. Sarah's analysis revealed narrow time windows between periods of extreme turbulence, brief opportunities when atmospheric conditions might allow safe flight operations if timing and navigation were executed with precision that eliminated any margin for error. Her systematic evaluation of wind patterns, pressure gradients, and precipitation intensity identified specific routes and altitudes that could minimize exposure to the most dangerous conditions. The rescue plan that emerged from Sarah's analysis was complex and demanding, requiring precise coordination between aircraft systems, crew members, and ground personnel who would be operating under hurricane conditions. Every element of the mission would need to be executed exactly as planned, with no room for improvisation or adaptation when circumstances changed unexpectedly. Master Sergeant Rodriguez reviewed Sarah's cargo loading calculations with professional admiration for their thoroughness and accuracy. Her analysis accounted for weight distribution changes that would occur as passengers were loaded under emergency conditions, fuel consumption variations due to extreme weather flying, and center of gravity shifts that could affect aircraft handling during critical phases of flight. Technical Sergeant Kim examined Sarah's system management plans with appreciation for her understanding of how different aircraft components would be affected by severe turbulence and extreme weather conditions. Her preparation included backup procedures for hydraulic failures, electrical problems, and pressurization issues that could develop when aircraft systems were stressed beyond normal operating parameters. Captain Monroe studied Sarah's navigation plans with growing respect for the precision of her route planning and timing calculations. Sarah had identified specific waypoints where weather conditions would be most manageable, calculated fuel requirements with margins that accounted for multiple contingencies, and developed communication procedures that would maintain coordination with air traffic control despite interference from Elena's electrical activity. The pre-flight briefing was conducted with the systematic thoroughness that characterized all of Sarah's preparation, but with an intensity that reflected the life-or-death nature of the mission they were about to undertake. Every crew member understood that their survival depended on executing their assigned responsibilities with precision that eliminated any possibility of error or miscommunication. Sarah's briefing style impressed experienced crew members who'd worked with pilots ranging from recent graduates to seasoned veterans with thousands of hours of combat experience. Her systematic approach combined technical competence with clear communication, ensuring that everyone understood not just their specific responsibilities but also how their actions would affect the overall mission success. The aircraft preparation process revealed the depth of Sarah's technical knowledge and her attention to details that could become critical under extreme conditions. She personally inspected systems that other pilots might delegate to crew members, asking specific questions about recent maintenance actions, and verifying that all backup systems were functioning within acceptable parameters. Rodriguez observed Sarah's inspection process with professional appreciation, noting that her questions revealed understanding of how different systems would interact under the stress of extreme weather flying. Her systematic approach to aircraft preparation exceeded what he expected from pilots with far more experience, suggesting preparation that went beyond normal training requirements. Kim found himself answering technical questions that demonstrated Sarah's comprehensive understanding of aircraft systems and their limitations under extreme conditions. Her preparation had included study of system interactions that weren't covered in standard training curricula, knowledge that could become critical when multiple systems were stressed simultaneously during hurricane flying. Monroe watched Sarah's preparation with growing confidence in their mission's prospects for success. Sarah's systematic approach eliminated the kind of oversights that could become dangerous under pressure, and her attention to backup procedures suggested that she was prepared for problems that other pilots might not anticipate until they developed during critical phases of flight. The takeoff was scheduled during a brief window when Elena's outer bands would create challenging but manageable conditions for departure, with weather expected to deteriorate rapidly once the aircraft was airborne. The timing required precise coordination with air traffic control and weather monitoring services that were tracking Elena's movement in real time. Sarah's taxi procedures were executed with the same methodical precision that characterized all of her flying, with careful attention to wind direction, runway conditions, and aircraft performance parameters that would affect takeoff safety. Her radio communications were professional and clear, providing air traffic control with information they needed while requesting updates about weather conditions along their planned route. The takeoff itself demonstrated the value of Sarah's systematic preparation and thorough understanding of aircraft performance under extreme conditions. Elena's outer wind bands created turbulence and wind shear that would have challenged experienced pilots, but Sarah's precise control inputs and systematic response to changing conditions resulted in a smooth departure despite challenging atmospheric conditions. Rodriguez felt the difference immediately, noting that Sarah's aircraft handling was smoother and more controlled than what he'd experienced with other pilots flying in similar conditions. Her systematic approach to power management and control inputs eliminated the kind of erratic aircraft behavior that could stress both equipment and crew members during extended flights in rough weather. Kim monitored engine parameters and system performance with professional appreciation for Sarah's precise power management and systematic attention to aircraft limitations. Her flying technique minimized stress on aircraft systems while maintaining the performance necessary to complete their mission within the narrow time window that Elena's approach was providing. Monroe observed Sarah's decision-making process with growing admiration for her ability to balance multiple competing priorities while maintaining systematic attention to safety factors that could become critical as weather conditions continued deteriorating. Her approach demonstrated the kind of mature judgment that usually required years of operational experience to develop. The flight toward the rescue location required navigation through weather conditions that exceeded anything covered in training scenarios, with turbulence that tested both aircraft capabilities and crew endurance. Elena's spiral bands created areas of severe atmospheric disturbance that required constant course corrections and altitude changes to maintain safe flight parameters. Sarah's navigation was precise despite the challenging conditions, with systematic attention to weather radar information and continuous coordination with air traffic control personnel who were tracking Elena's development in real time. Her flight path avoided the most dangerous areas while maintaining progress toward their destination, demonstrating preparation that had anticipated the specific challenges they would encounter. The crew coordination during the flight revealed the value of Sarah's systematic briefing and thorough preparation for emergency procedures that could become necessary when flying in extreme weather conditions. Each crew member understood their responsibilities and responded to changing conditions with confidence that came from comprehensive preparation rather than improvised responses to unexpected situations. Master Sergeant Rodriguez monitored cargo systems and passenger preparation areas with appreciation for Sarah's smooth flying technique, which minimized the stress that severe turbulence would normally place on equipment and personnel during extended flights in rough weather. Her systematic approach to aircraft control resulted in a more comfortable flight despite external conditions that would have made other pilots' techniques result in a much rougher ride. Technical Sergeant Kim tracked aircraft systems with professional satisfaction, as Sarah's precise flying technique kept stress levels within acceptable parameters despite the extreme conditions they were encountering. Her systematic power management and control inputs prevented the kind of system strain that could lead to mechanical failures during critical phases of the mission. Captain Monroe handled radio communications and navigation assistance, with growing confidence in Sarah's ability to manage the complex mission requirements while maintaining systematic attention to safety factors that could become critical as they approached their destination. Her preparation had anticipated communication challenges and navigation problems that were developing exactly as she'd predicted. The approach to the rescue location required flying through Elena's strengthening outer bands, with wind patterns and turbulence that pushed aircraft and crew capabilities to their limits. The destination airfield was experiencing crosswinds that were approaching the maximum limits for safe landing operations, with conditions expected to deteriorate beyond acceptable parameters within the next hour. Sarah's approach planning demonstrated the value of her detailed weather analysis and systematic preparation for extreme flying conditions. Her calculations had identified the optimal approach path and timing that would minimize exposure to the most dangerous wind patterns while providing adequate safety margins for the landing phase of the mission. The landing itself became a demonstration of pilot skill that impressed crew members who'd flown with some of the most experienced aviators in the Air Force. Sarah's systematic approach to aircraft control, combined with her detailed understanding of wind patterns and aircraft performance limitations, resulted in a smooth touchdown, despite crosswinds that would have challenged pilots with far more experience. Rodriguez experienced the kind of smooth landing that demonstrated exceptional pilot skill under extreme conditions, with aircraft control that eliminated the hard impacts and erratic behavior that usually characterize landings in severe crosswinds. Sarah's systematic approach had resulted in precise aircraft handling that protected both equipment and personnel during a critical phase of the mission. Kim monitored landing systems with professional appreciation for Sarah's precise control inputs and systematic response to changing wind conditions during the approach phase. Her technique demonstrated understanding of aircraft performance characteristics that usually required years of experience to develop, with power management and control coordination that minimized stress on landing systems. Monroe observed Sarah's landing technique with genuine admiration for her ability to maintain precise aircraft control despite wind conditions that were approaching the limits of what even experienced pilots could handle safely. Her systematic preparation and thorough understanding of aircraft capabilities had enabled her to execute a landing that exceeded what most pilots could accomplish under similar conditions. The ground operations at the rescue location revealed the extent of the crisis that Morrison's crew was facing, with mechanical problems that had left their aircraft unable to operate safely and personnel who were facing life-threatening exposure to hurricane conditions that were approaching the airfield faster than anyone had anticipated. Morrison's crew was visibly shaken by their experience, with aircraft damage that made their situation desperate, and weather conditions that were eliminating options for alternative transportation or emergency shelter. The intelligence personnel they'd evacuated were critical national security assets who couldn't be risked to hurricane exposure, but whose rescue would require flying in conditions that exceeded normal safety parameters. Sarah's assessment of Morrison's aircraft confirmed that mechanical problems had made it unsafe for flight operations under any conditions, with hydraulic damage that compromised essential flight controls and electrical problems that affected navigation and communication systems. The aircraft would have to be abandoned to Elena's fury, with focus shifted to personnel evacuation using Sarah's aircraft as the only viable option. The passenger loading process required careful coordination under deteriorating weather conditions, with winds that were approaching dangerous levels for ground operations and precipitation that was reducing visibility and creating hazardous working conditions for ground personnel. Sarah's systematic planning had anticipated these challenges and provided procedures that enabled efficient loading despite the adverse conditions. Master Sergeant Rodriguez coordinated the loading process with professional efficiency, using Sarah's detailed calculations to ensure that weight distribution and center of gravity remained within acceptable parameters despite the urgent nature of the evacuation. His experience working with Sarah during training operations had prepared him for her systematic approach to cargo operations under pressure. The additional passengers pushed aircraft weight and performance parameters toward maximum limits, requiring careful calculation of fuel requirements and takeoff performance that would determine whether the mission could be completed safely. Sarah's preparation had included analysis of these contingencies, with backup plans that could be implemented if conditions required modifications to their original mission parameters. Morrison's crew transferred to Sarah's aircraft with expressions that revealed their awareness of how close they'd come to disaster, and their appreciation for the rescue operation that was being conducted under conditions that few pilots would attempt. Their professional gratitude was evident in their cooperation with loading procedures and their willingness to follow Sarah's systematic approach to passenger management. The intelligence personnel were obviously relieved to be evacuating the threatened airfield, but their expressions also revealed awareness that their rescue flight would be conducted under extreme weather conditions that carried significant risks. Their cooperation with crew instructions and systematic preparation for the flight demonstrated confidence in Sarah's capabilities despite the challenging conditions they would face. Technical Sergeant Kim completed final system checks with professional satisfaction that all aircraft components were functioning within acceptable parameters for the challenging flight ahead. Sarah's thorough pre-flight inspection and systematic approach to aircraft preparation had ensured that they were departing with equipment that was optimized for the extreme conditions they would encounter during the return flight. The departure from the rescue location required takeoff into wind conditions that were strengthening rapidly, as Elena's approach compressed the timeline for safe flight operations. Sarah's calculations had identified the optimal runway and departure procedure that would minimize exposure to dangerous wind patterns while providing adequate performance margins for their heavily loaded aircraft. Captain Monroe monitored weather radar and communication systems during the departure phase, observing Sarah's systematic response to changing wind conditions and her precise coordination with air traffic control personnel, who were managing increasingly complex traffic patterns as other aircraft also attempted to evacuate before Elena's arrival. The takeoff itself demonstrated exceptional pilot skill under extreme conditions, with Sarah's systematic approach to power management and aircraft control resulting in smooth performance despite winds that were gusting well above normal operational limits. Her preparation and technical competence enabled safe departure despite loading and weather conditions that would have challenged the most experienced pilots. Rodriguez felt the aircraft respond smoothly to Sarah's control inputs despite the challenging takeoff conditions, with systematic power application and precise handling that eliminated the erratic behavior that usually characterized heavily loaded departures in severe crosswinds. Her technique demonstrated preparation and skill that exceeded what he'd experienced with many veteran pilots. Kim monitored engine performance and aircraft systems during the departure, with appreciation for Sarah's systematic approach to power management, which optimized performance while maintaining stress levels within acceptable parameters despite the extreme operating conditions. Her preparation had enabled efficient aircraft operation despite circumstances that pushed equipment capabilities toward their limits. The return flight required navigation through Elena's strengthening storm bands, with weather conditions that had deteriorated significantly during the time they'd spent on the ground conducting rescue operations. The atmospheric disturbance was now severe enough to ground most aircraft, with turbulence and wind patterns that exceeded the capabilities of standard flight operations. Sarah's route planning proved its value during this phase, with systematic navigation that avoided the most dangerous areas while maintaining progress toward their destination, despite weather conditions that were changing rapidly as Elena continued strengthening and accelerating toward the coast. Her preparation had anticipated these developments and provided alternative options when original plans required modification. The crew coordination during the return flight demonstrated the effectiveness of Sarah's systematic briefing and thorough preparation for the challenging conditions they were encountering. Each crew member executed their responsibilities with confidence that came from comprehensive understanding of their roles and systematic preparation for emergency procedures that could become necessary during the flight. Master Sergeant Rodriguez managed passenger coordination and cargo systems with professional efficiency, using techniques that Sarah's systematic approach had optimized for comfort and safety during extended flights in severe turbulence. His experience working with her during training operations had prepared him for her methodical attention to details that improved both safety and passenger comfort. Technical Sergeant Kim monitored aircraft systems with growing appreciation for Sarah's flying technique, which maintained stress levels within acceptable parameters despite weather conditions that would have caused system strain with less precise aircraft handling. Her systematic approach to power management and control inputs protected equipment while maintaining the performance necessary to complete their mission. Captain Monroe handled navigation assistance and communication duties with increasing confidence in Sarah's ability to manage the complex flight requirements while maintaining systematic attention to safety factors that were becoming more critical as weather conditions continued deteriorating throughout their route. Her preparation had anticipated communication challenges and provided solutions that maintained coordination with air traffic control. The approach to Peterson Air Force Base required flying through Elena's outer spiral bands, which had strengthened considerably during their mission and now presented wind conditions that exceeded the normal limits for safe landing operations. The airfield was experiencing severe crosswinds and turbulence that would challenge even the most experienced pilots. Sarah's approach planning demonstrated the culmination of her systematic preparation and detailed weather analysis, with precise calculations that identified the optimal approach path and timing for landing, despite conditions that were approaching the absolute limits of what aircraft and pilot capabilities could handle safely. Her preparation had anticipated these exact conditions and provided procedures that maximized their chances of successful completion. The landing approach itself became a demonstration of exceptional pilot skill that would be remembered by everyone who witnessed it, with Sarah's systematic aircraft control and precise response to extreme wind conditions resulting in a smooth approach despite atmospheric disturbance that would have defeated less prepared pilots. Her technique combined technical competence with systematic decision-making under pressure that demonstrated maturity beyond her experience level. Rodriguez experienced the kind of controlled approach that revealed exceptional pilot skill. With Sarah's systematic management of aircraft energy and precise control inputs, eliminating the erratic behavior that usually characterized approaches in severe turbulence and crosswinds. Her preparation and technical competence had enabled precise aircraft handling despite conditions that challenged the limits of both equipment and pilot capabilities. Kim monitored approach systems with professional admiration for Sarah's systematic power management and aircraft control, which maintained optimal performance parameters despite wind conditions that were varying rapidly and creating challenges that required constant adjustment and precise coordination between multiple aircraft systems. Her technique demonstrated preparation that exceeded standard training requirements. Monroe observed Sarah's approach technique with genuine awe at her ability to maintain precise aircraft control despite weather conditions that were among the most challenging that any of them had ever encountered. Her systematic preparation and thorough understanding of aircraft performance characteristics had enabled her to execute an approach that demonstrated exceptional professional competence under extreme conditions. The touchdown was executed with precision that impressed ground personnel who were monitoring the approach, with Sarah's systematic aircraft control resulting in a smooth landing despite crosswinds that were gusting well above the normal limits for safe landing operations. Her preparation and skill had enabled successful completion of a mission that would have been impossible for less capable pilots. The post-flight procedures revealed the extent of what Sarah had accomplished during her rescue mission, with successful evacuation of critical personnel under weather conditions that had grounded other aircraft and challenged the limits of what military airlift operations could accomplish safely. Her systematic approach and thorough preparation had enabled mission success despite circumstances that exceeded normal operational parameters. Master Sergeant Rodriguez completed post-flight inspections with professional appreciation for Sarah's flying technique, which had minimized stress on aircraft systems despite the extreme conditions they'd encountered throughout the mission. His experience working with pilots ranging from recent graduates to seasoned veterans had given him perspective on exceptional performance, and Sarah's systematic competence had impressed him more than flashy techniques from more experienced aviators. Technical Sergeant Kim reviewed system performance data with admiration for Sarah's precise aircraft management, which had maintained all parameters within acceptable limits despite weather conditions that would have caused equipment strain with less systematic flying techniques. Her preparation and technical competence had protected valuable aircraft while accomplishing a mission that pushed both equipment and crew capabilities to their limits. Captain Monroe filed flight reports that documented exceptional pilot performance under extreme conditions, with systematic decision-making and precise aircraft control that had enabled mission success despite weather challenges that would have defeated less prepared crews. Her professional assessment emphasized Sarah's maturity and competence under pressure, qualities that distinguished exceptional pilots from merely adequate ones. The debriefing session that followed the mission became a professional education for everyone involved, with detailed analysis of Sarah's systematic approach and the preparation that had enabled successful completion of a rescue operation under conditions that exceeded normal training scenarios. Her methodical planning and precise execution had created a template for extreme weather operations that would influence training protocols for years to come. Major Williams conducted the debrief with professional appreciation for what Sarah had accomplished, emphasizing the systematic preparation and technical competence that had enabled mission success despite challenges that would have defeated less thorough approaches. The mission had demonstrated that quiet competence and methodical preparation could produce exceptional results under extreme pressure. Colonel Hayes attended the debriefing personally, recognizing that Sarah's performance had implications beyond individual pilot evaluation and represented capabilities that would influence future operational planning and training protocols. Her systematic approach had demonstrated methods for accomplishing missions that were previously considered impossible under such extreme weather conditions. The evaluation of Sarah's performance was unanimous among senior officers and experienced crew members who had observed or participated in the mission. Her systematic preparation, technical competence, and precise decision-making under extreme pressure had demonstrated professional capabilities that exceeded what they expected from pilots with far more experience. Morrison attended the debriefing with visible humility, acknowledging that his natural confidence approach had proven inadequate for the extreme conditions that Elena had created. His experience being rescued by a pilot he'd previously dismissed had provided education about the value of systematic preparation over flashy flying techniques. Webb's absence from operational flying during the critical phases of the evacuation had ended his participation in the advanced training program, with performance evaluations that documented his inflexibility under pressure and inability to adapt when conditions exceeded standard procedural parameters. His family connections couldn't compensate for professional limitations that had been revealed under operational conditions. Park's performance during the medical evacuation had been adequate but unremarkable, demonstrating technical competence without the exceptional decision-making under pressure that distinguished outstanding pilots from merely capable ones. His analytical approach had served him well during routine operations, but had revealed limitations when rapid adaptation was required. The recognition that followed Sarah's performance was immediate and comprehensive, with recommendations for advanced assignments that were typically reserved for pilots with years of operational experience. Her systematic approach and demonstrated competence under extreme conditions had earned respect from senior officers who understood exceptional performance when they witnessed it. The assignment opportunities that became available to Sarah following her rescue mission included positions with elite airlift units that handled the most challenging operations and worked with the most advanced aircraft in the Air Force inventory. Her systematic competence and proven ability to perform under extreme pressure had qualified her for responsibilities that were usually reserved for much more experienced pilots. Master Sergeant Rodriguez requested assignment to any unit where Sarah would be stationed, recognizing that her systematic approach to aircraft operations and thorough preparation for challenging missions represented the kind of professional competence that he wanted to support throughout the remainder of his career. His confidence in her capabilities exceeded what he felt for many veteran pilots. Technical Sergeant Kim submitted similar requests, emphasizing that Sarah's technical competence and systematic attention to aircraft systems represented the kind of professional approach that optimized both safety and mission effectiveness. His experience working with her during extreme conditions had demonstrated capabilities that he respected more than flashy techniques from more experienced aviators. Captain Monroe recommended Sarah for immediate promotion and advanced training opportunities, documenting her exceptional performance under extreme conditions and her systematic decision-making under pressure as evidence of leadership potential that exceeded normal expectations for pilots at her experience level. Her professional assessment emphasized Sarah's maturity and competence as qualities that distinguished exceptional officers. The training program evaluations that were conducted following the hurricane evacuation operations revealed systematic weaknesses in approaches that emphasized confidence over preparation and natural ability over technical competence. Sarah's performance had demonstrated the value of methodical preparation and thorough understanding of aircraft systems under conditions that challenged traditional assumptions about pilot training. The policy changes that emerged from analysis of the evacuation operations emphasized systematic preparation and technical competence as essential qualities for advanced pilot training, with revised curricula that reflected lessons learned from Sarah's exceptional performance under extreme conditions. Her methodical approach became a template for training protocols that would influence pilot development for years to come. Morrison's career trajectory was redirected toward assignments that would provide additional training in systematic preparation and technical competence, with performance evaluations that documented his need for development in areas where natural confidence had proven inadequate. His experience during the hurricane evacuation had provided education about professional limitations that required attention. The cultural changes that spread throughout the training program following Sarah's performance were comprehensive and lasting, with new emphasis on systematic preparation and technical competence that challenged previous assumptions about pilot development and operational effectiveness. Her quiet competence had demonstrated alternatives to approaches that emphasized personality over preparation. The respect that Sarah had earned from experienced personnel extended throughout the Air Force community, with her performance during hurricane rescue operations becoming a case study for exceptional decision-making under extreme pressure. Her systematic approach and thorough preparation had created a standard for professional competence that influenced training and operational planning. The legend of Sarah's hurricane rescue mission spread through military aviation communities worldwide, not through dramatic publicity or official recognition ceremonies, but through professional networks that shared information about exceptional performance and effective techniques. Her methodical approach had demonstrated capabilities that impressed experienced aviators who understood the challenges she'd overcome. The graduation ceremony for the Advanced Airlift Training Program took place 6 weeks after Hurricane Elena, with Sarah receiving honors that recognized her exceptional performance and systematic competence under extreme conditions. Her quiet dignity during the recognition reflected the same humility that had characterized her approach throughout the 18 months of intensive training. The assignment that followed graduation placed Sarah with the 437th Airlift Wing at Charleston Air Force Base, where she would be responsible for global airlift operations that required the systematic competence and technical expertise that she demonstrated during her rescue mission. Her new position offered opportunities for rapid advancement and increasing responsibility. The influence of Sarah's systematic approach extended far beyond her individual career, with training protocols and operational procedures that reflected lessons learned from her performance under extreme conditions. Her methodical preparation and technical competence had demonstrated approaches that improved both safety and effectiveness for military airlift operations worldwide. Years later, when military aviation historians analyzed the evolution of pilot training and operational procedures, Sarah's hurricane rescue mission would be recognized as a turning point that challenged traditional assumptions about pilot development and demonstrated the value of systematic preparation over natural confidence. Her quiet competence had influenced military aviation in ways that would benefit pilots and crews for decades to come. The young woman who had been overlooked and underestimated throughout her training had proven that exceptional performance came not from dramatic gestures or confident personalities, but from systematic preparation, technical competence, and the quiet dignity that enabled clear thinking under extreme pressure. Her methodical approach had saved lives and demonstrated that the most important qualities for military aviators were often the ones that didn't announce themselves with fanfare. Sarah Chen continued her military aviation career with the same systematic competence that had characterized her training, taking on increasingly challenging assignments and responsibilities that reflected the respect she'd earned from experienced personnel who understood exceptional performance when they witnessed it. Her influence on military aviation extended far beyond her individual accomplishments, changing how the Air Force thought about pilot development and operational effectiveness. The hurricane that had threatened to end careers and cost lives had instead become the crucible that revealed true professional competence and demonstrated that quiet preparation could produce exceptional results when dramatic confidence failed. Sarah's systematic approach had not only saved the people who were trapped by Elena's fury, but had also transformed how military aviation understood the relationship between preparation and performance under extreme conditions. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.